Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today we're going to work on processing some of this rough cut lumber. I've got a bunch of stacks of lumber here. I've got some leaned against the wall. I've got another stack down in my equipment building, and I've got 2 stacks just outside the doors of the shop here. So all of this is in different stages of drying, but everything that's in here is completely dry and ready to use. So some of this lumber is going to be used for rough cut framing and building a new building for the sawmill. But a lot of this lumber right here is going to be used for fine woodworking. And my wife has told me that I'm making Christmas presents for a whole list of people. And she's like, you got all that wood out there, you can just make all this stuff. I love the idea. I'm glad she said it, but none of this is ready to use. It's all got bows in it. It's inconsistent widths. It's inconsistent thicknesses. Some of it has live edge, and we don't want live edge. So I've got a lot of work to do. Today, we're going to process some of this and get it ready to use. And then in the next week, I'm going to rearrange the layout of the shop and organize my lumber so that I can bring all these stacks in and get them into one stack that's more ready to use. First things first though, I need a bunch of 1x material that is either 4 inches or 6 inches wide. And technically 4 3/8 or 5 1/2. But let's start going through this and see what we've got. This right here, I went on a road trip a few hours away to test out a different mill. And I can't remember, I would have to check the video to see what type of wood this is. But it's got a really nice color to it. It was all spalted, but it's also got some soft spots. And this is neat, but it's not suitable for any project like I'm working on today. So we're gonna have to move this out of the way. This stuff is really lightweight. I could almost grab the whole stack at once. What I'm doing right now is prepping for the day I've got coming, which will just be sorting all this lumber and restacking it, because having it like this is not letting it dry properly necessarily. It makes it more likely to dry warped, and I can't tell what I've got. It's got to be more organized. Everything that's over here, I'm pretty sure was from chainsaw milling. This is oak. It would work. It's good solid wood. It's thick enough. It's wide enough. But let's see if you can see down it. So on first look, you might say this is a good board, but how hard it is to see right there. That has a gap right there. And this isn't long enough for you to really see it. This is too bowed for me to use. I need a slab flattener for this. You're actually going to see me setting up and using a slab flattener in the next couple weeks. But I can't just run this through the planer and get that result. I would have to either use my homemade slab flattener or get a better one. Oh, let's see what we've got here. This is not bowed. It's oak again. It's solid. It's got some knots, but that's just character. Now this has some bow in it down the length. It's got some gouges. This is where I'm getting at. Just because you cut something on the mill doesn't mean it's ready for your next project. Oh yeah, so it's got bow out down at the bottom. This is from not being stacked properly. 3-inch thick slab here. We're not going to use that. Okay. This is bowed. This one, I believe, can be used. This is our first oak board. Nope, got a lot of bow in it. It's not going to work. This is live edge, and I don't think it's thick enough. And these are slab wood. Those need to go out on the slab rack. So I'll just throw those outside here in a second. So out of all of this wood on the wall here, that all looked like the right stuff. I've got 2 boards, and I'm not even sure if they're good, because just because I can't see the bow and twist doesn't mean it's not there. Now, I'm not going to go through and talk about every board in this stack. That'd be really boring. But what I want to do is talk in general about what goes into using the lumber off of your sawmill for fine woodworking projects or anything that requires a level of precision in the build. This is really interesting. Everything in this stack seems perfectly flat except for the top board. You can see it bowing out. Means that the top of this board dried faster than the bottom. That's what causes that. One thing I want to mention before I go through all the rest of the stuff in this video is dry time on lumber. For hardwoods, it's a little bit longer than softwoods, but on hardwoods, the rule of thumb is you need 1 year for every inch of thickness to dry your lumber. So a 1-inch board is going to dry 1/2 inch from the top and 1/2 inch from the bottom. 1 inch thick hardwood should be completely dry in 6 months, depending on the conditions where you're drying it. So a 2-inch thick is going to dry 1 inch from the top, 1 inch from the bottom, if it's got enough air movement for air to get under it. So it's going to take 1 year for a 2-inch piece of hardwood to dry. It's not exact. It's just a pretty good rule of thumb. And you might cut that in half for softwoods. But then ultimately you're going to have a general idea, and then you're going to check it with a moisture meter. You know, it's really fun looking at some of these stacks and then remembering where they came from. And when I saw this black mark on here going all the way across, and then remembered this stack being at the end, this was a standing dead tree from right back behind where the Quonset hut is. And I pushed it over with the skid steer. That's how dead it was. And then I milled it with the chainsaw mill inside this building last winter. And it's going to be cool to make something out of that, because I thought when I pushed it down, it was probably too far gone. But now we've decided we're going to use this whole stack here. First thing we need to know, is it dry? It should be dry, but is it? 11.6. 11.3. 10.4. You'd like to be under 12%. Like 6 or 8% is perfect, but actually the wood will not get drier than the building you're working in. And it's relative humidity in the air and the humidity in the wood is going to give you 2 different numbers because it's on 2 different scales. But basically, if this wood will not dry in a humid room, you put it into a drier area, it'll dry more on this meter. And then you put it in a more humid area, it'll go back up. But this is dry enough to use. It's way too thick, and it's too wide to go through the planer. So once again, I really need a slab flattener if I was going to do anything with this in the condition it is. But I think instead of that, I'm going to slice this up and make my small pieces with. And while it might feel like kind of a waste to take a wide slab like this and cut it into small boards, it's been sitting here for a year with nothing, no one having an interest in using it. I want to process through this wood and just start working through it. And I don't have a bunch of narrow stuff. Everything I have is going to be wide like this. So the first thing I need to do is get this chopped up into lengths. And then I can work on getting one straight edge. And then, getting a parallel straight edge. And we'll just go through each step of that one at a time. So I'm already changing my plans. And the bottom line is that dealing with really wide material requires either a little bit of a creative process or some really expensive equipment. And I already have a lot of money invested in tools and equipment to do this work. And I'm not looking to upsize that to some giant planer. So I was going to cut these lengths thinking it would be easier to joint this material if it was all already cut to length. It's easier to handle smaller material. But this 12-inch compound miter saw can only go to 14. and this material is wider than that. I've been doing something with my jointer here that isn't very smart. See, it's got this long blade, and I've been doing all my cutting with thin material with this guide back here. So we're always cutting with the same part of the blade, which is not ideal. And also, every bit of the blade you're not cutting with is a safety hazard. This fence should be scooted out. Something else I want to say that's probably pretty obvious is that I am no expert at really any of this. I'm just learning as I go. But what I have learned is that there are a lot more ways to skin a cat than you might initially think. Not that I have a lot of interest in cat skinning, but you do not need a jointer to do jointing. I've already done one video on how to do your jointing completely on the table saw. I watched a video today on how to do jointing with nothing but a circular saw and a homemade track. So, don't let a lack of equipment stop you from doing what you want to do. Before I had a mill, I used a chainsaw mill. But having the right tool for the job does make it easier. After making my adjustment, I was cutting almost too far out. So every time I move it in or out, I check for square. Like I said earlier, this may come through the jointer again after it's been planed and cut to width. But it's a lot easier to handle in those shorter planks. If that went through the jointer and everything was done properly, we should get like an airtight joint between these two boards. So that is very good. It might not be perfect, like airtight, but it's definitely good enough to put this side against the table saw fence and get these cut to width. So now we've got 6 of these beautiful, true 1-inch or a little more than 1-inch rock solid oak, just awesome lumber that you can't just go to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up boards like this. And that's the real positive. Because I'm showing that there's a long process and there's some negatives to getting to this point. There's a lot of time and work involved. But you can't just go buy these. I mean, you can probably at certain places, but you got to search it out and then you're going to pay a premium. So we've got 6 of these. Now it feels like, oh, we just repeat this exact process. I haven't moved the settings. I haven't moved my fence on the table saw. Just do the exact same thing again. But I actually can't, because half of this stack I can, and half of it I can't because some of these have live edge. You know what? I think what I'll do is I'll go through all the ones that don't have live edge, repeat the exact same process, and probably do that off camera, get me a nice stack of boards. Then we'll go through the ones that do have the live edge, because that'll be a different process. I forgot to mention it earlier, but when the saws are running, I've got these turned on. They just pull dust out of the air that the dust collection system doesn't get. That is the entire stack, but I've got 4 more stacks like this over there. Let's bring them all over and see if we've got enough. I think we have enough wood here to proceed to the next step. And I don't think we need those other boards I was talking about, but let me go ahead and show you what I meant. So this is the one that was on top. And you can see it's live edge on both sides. Obviously you can't put that through the jointer. So you need to somehow find a way to get a straight cut to get a start on processing this board down. And there are a bunch of different ways to do that. The way I was going to use was to take a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that has a true edge, put it on right here and screw it down on each end. And then that 3/4 inch plywood runs against your fence, and then you can make your first cut. There's actually a bunch of different ways to do that, but that's the way I was going to use. But come to find out, this is the only board that was live edge on both sides. And when I cut it into 3 pieces, 2 of them split down the middle. So this would be the only one, and I'm not setting a jig up for it. Part of me wants to describe this as just oak, but the fact that it was at the beginning stages of being rotten, look at the effect it has on the color. I'm almost sure that was oak, but when I knocked it down, it had no bark, and I didn't have a good way to identify it, but it's so much nicer looking when it's almost past that point. Now, it might not be quite as strong, but it's definitely stronger than any pine you're gonna buy at the hardware store. I had to run each board through the planer probably 4 or 5 times before all of them removed all the material from one side. Then I had to flip them over and run them through one more time to get a semi-smooth side on both sides. A semi-smooth finish on both sides. And then at that point, we're left with a little bit less thickness than I wanted. It doesn't really matter. They can be however thick they are. So most people are using 1x material, which is 3/4 of an inch. That's 750 thousandths. These are about 680 thousandths, which is 11/16. Should be just fine. And I mean, this is some beautiful hardwood. I mean, I really have an appreciation for hardwood compared to pine. But it wouldn't matter. If I was doing the work myself, I'd be just as proud no matter what kind of wood it was. I was supposed to do 9 of these. I've got enough wood here for 7. There's some cedar right outside that door. I could find more of the same stuff and do do some more of these. I might do one cedar and one walnut. Anyway, I'm going to finish this project out and make all of these Christmas gifts probably in tomorrow's video, if nothing else comes up. So if you're interested in seeing what I make out of this, come back tomorrow. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.